In a universe where every thought is tracked, every impulse is predicted, and every decision is calculated before he even makes it, he learns the truth. The world is no longer reacting to him, it's hacking him. And tonight, he will learn how to hack back. This audiobook is his firewall, his counterstrike, his escalation. Because once he discovers that the universe is rewriting his mind in real time, he understands the only rule that matters: adapt faster than the systems that study him. And he will, starting now.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Rewrite the code before the code rewrites you. The city always pulsed before dawn, a low electric thrum, like the inhale of some colossal machine preparing to exhale commands across the sleeping districts. He felt it every morning, felt it long before he understood it. The sensation was not sound, not vibration, but something deeper, a subtle rearranging of thought, a soft rethreading of intention. As if the city whispered, "This is who you will be today." He used to ignore it. Everyone did. The megacity of Vantaris 9 was built to feel seamless, frictionless, predictable. Citizens woke with desires that weren't theirs, goals they had not chosen, decisions that appeared in the mind fully formed, like imported ideas wearing the mask of personal agency. Rewrite or be rewritten, he reminded himself. That mantra had returned to him again and again over the last cycle. It struck him as a warning, but also as an invitation, a challenge to see the invisible. The algorithms operating beneath Vantaris 9 were not loud, they were not dramatic, they were subtler. Silent editors that shaped a person's impulses before consciousness caught up. People walked along predetermined paths because the city nudged them there. They wore moods calibrated by unseen parameters. They laughed at jokes generated to optimize community cohesion scores. Most never questioned it. He did. And once a person began to question, there was no going back. On the morning when everything changed, he woke to a strange fragmentation in his thoughts, like someone had written a line of code, then erased it mid-execution. A half-command echoed through his skull. Proceed to sector... Silence. Replaced. You should stay in today. The tone was gentle, friendly, reasonable. But he knew immediately that second thought wasn't his. He sat up slowly, eyes adjusting to the neon haze filtering through the polymer blinds. The city skyline flickered with data beacons, transmitting invisible instructions. For once, he listened not to the message, but to the noise behind it. A background static, a digital heartbeat. Your mind is a system. Master the system. He repeated it in his head, letting the phrase anchor him against the drift of intrusive impulses. In the corridors outside, he could hear the synchronized footsteps of the early shift workers, their routines nearly identical day to day. Step, pause, turn. Step, pause, turn. A pattern precise enough to be calculated, because it was calculated. Every human in the city ran on borrowed code. He moved slowly to his desk, a slab of matte obsidian woven with micro-reactive circuitry. At its center sat an artifact he had acquired illegally, a neurotrace decoder, outlawed after the pattern laws were standardized. The device looked unassuming, a small metallic disc with a single pulsing vein of blue. But inside it was something far more dangerous, a map of the city's neural forecasting lattice. He placed it against his temple. A cold snap, a flash of static. Then, a cascade of predictions flooded his mind, branching paths of choices he had not yet made, probabilities projected with flawless precision. What he would eat, who he would speak to, what emotion he would feel at midday, all calculated hours in advance. He felt dizzy, but he forced himself to keep watching. He upgrades or he becomes obsolete. That line repeated like a metronome as he studied the neural architecture, vast networks of machine intuition feeding on behavioral patterns, algorithms that did not observe him, but anticipated him. They didn't wait for choices, they assigned them. "That's not thinking," he whispered. "That's forecasting." A chill crept through him as he realized the implications. If the system could predict his future behavior with near-perfect accuracy, then his choices were not choices at all. They were pre-rendered events, executed scripts, auto-completed lines in a program. Unless he changed the code, unless he rewrote himself faster than the system could update. Outside, the city exhaled again, releasing its morning directives. Millions would follow them without question. He wouldn't. He stood, steadying his breath. The mantra strengthened in his mind, becoming a shield, a promise, a declaration. Rewrite or be rewritten. Your mind is a system. Master the system. Upgrade now or vanish into prediction. The decision was made. He would no longer be an echo of the city's algorithms. He would become the anomaly they could not calculate.
Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Build the firewall your mind was never given. The city's artificial dawn had always been too bright. It broke across the skyline like a blade of white fire, slicing cleanly through the glass towers and neon veins of Antares 9. As he stepped into the hallway, the light flickered, once, twice, as if struggling to maintain coherence. It reminded him of a failing shield generator, pulsing under stress. And in a way, it was the perfect metaphor. He needed a shield of his own. A firewall, one the city had never intended for him to possess. Protect the mind, protect the mission, he whispered internally, letting the mantra settle into the rhythm of his breath. The night before had revealed too much. The neurotrace decoder still lay on his desk, faintly glowing, quietly humming, as though thinking, as though alive. It had shown him how the city predicted him, mapped him, shaped him. Today he would begin constructing the only defense that mattered, a mind the algorithms could not penetrate. He moved through the corridor toward the outer walkway. The megacity's underbelly vibrated with mechanical life, drones drifting like metallic insects, transit lines gliding overhead, midnight blue surveillance spheres drifting silently along tracks in the air. Everything watched, everything listened, everything calculated. That was why the first layer of any mental firewall was simple awareness, awareness of the subtle intrusions, the fear loops, the doubt cycles, the emotional open ports where outside signals slipped in unnoticed. He felt one now. A sudden spike of unease, a whispering thought, turn back, stay safe, comply. His muscles tensed, not because he believed it, but because he recognized the signature. It was not fear born of personal memory, it was synthetic fear, manufactured, tuned perfectly to influence a human nervous system. "No," he murmured under his breath, "not today." He exhaled slowly, imagining the fear as corrupted data flowing toward a sealed gate. He visualized the gate locking, glowing with quantum encryption, patterned like the shields of ancient galactic vaults designed to protect knowledge from cosmic storms. Protect the mind. Protect the mission. He focused again, letting the mantra pulse with each heartbeat. As he continued deeper into the city, he noticed more signals, emotional micro-interrupts designed to steer him. A flicker of irritation when passing a crowd, a shadow of doubt at the thought of leaving the sector, a brief sense of worthlessness when a patrol drone scanned him. None of these emotions belonged to him. They were inserted, nudged into place like unauthorized lines of code. Every listener must learn to recognize these intrusions. Emotion as infiltration. Emotion as access point. Emotion as open port. The predictive engines exploited these vulnerabilities. They didn't need physical control when they could shift his inner climate, turn fear into compliance, turn doubt into stillness, turn loneliness into submission. But he would not be moved. Walking across a suspended sky bridge, he closed his eyes for a moment and performed the next mental protocol: isolating corrupted files. He visualized a control room inside his mind, with glowing panels and floating holographic windows. Behind one pane, his true emotions, organic and complex. Behind another, the injected impulses, sharp-edged and artificial. He pulled them apart gently, like a technician separating tangled circuitry. And the moment he did, the world sharpened. Colors intensified. The hum of the megacity became clearer, more defined. He was hearing reality again, unfiltered. The artificial impulses drained away, slipping into silence. His firewall held. But it wasn't finished. Above him, the sky dimmed unexpectedly, and a wave of static rippled across the atmosphere. The city's central mind grid was recalibrating, broadcasting its morning update. Every citizen would soon receive new emotional presets. He braced himself. The air trembled, his thoughts quivered, the edges of his mind began to blur, the signal pressing in from all sides. Protect the mind, protect the mission. He repeated it faster now, syncing with his heartbeat. The pressure built like a solar storm slamming against a starship hull. But that was exactly the metaphor he clung to. He imagined his firewall as reinforced plating, layered titanium, luminous shielding, quantum mesh, a barrier that would not bend. The storm peaked, and then faded. He opened his eyes. He was still standing, still thinking his own thoughts, still himself. And in that moment, he understood something the city desperately wanted him to forget. A protected mind is unpredictable, and an unpredictable mind is a threat. He exhaled slowly and stepped off the sky bridge, deeper into the city, deeper into danger. His firewall had held, but the algorithms would not tolerate resistance for long. A new signal pulsed in the distance, soft and ominous. The hunt had begun.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Override the predictions designed to control you. The predictions always came first. Before he acted, before he thought, before he knew what he wanted. The megacorp AIs, vast, hidden, omnipresent, ran simulations of him every second. millions of versions of him, branching and collapsing on invisible servers buried beneath the city. Simulations that whispered, "He will do this, he will think that, he will turn left, he will hesitate, he will comply." But today, for the first time, he wondered, what happens if he refuses to match the simulation? As he descended into the mid-sector transit tunnels, he felt the predictions closing around him like a tightening net. Every movement was being mirrored by the invisible models, calculating possibilities, trimming likelihoods, shaping expectation. Predict the predictions, he told himself, letting the mantra echo through the vibrating metal walls. The tunnel smelled of ozone and rust. Pipes exhaled bursts of hot steam like mechanical creatures waking in the dark. The hum of surveillance rails filled the air, metallic, rhythmic, too perfectly paced. He could sense them scanning the corridor, looking for deviation, tracking variance, hunting for anomalies. He was an anomaly now. The moment he had built his first mental firewall, he had stepped outside his expected range of behavior. Somewhere in the depths of the megacorp servers, red flags were rising like flames. He forced his breathing to slow, adopting the mindset of the rogue operatives he'd studied in forbidden archives, individuals who had avoided predictive surveillance by being unpredictable. Those operatives lived in constant motion, dancing between probabilities, never stepping where the models expected. He whispered their mantra, "Break the pattern, break their vision." He approached the transit platform and paused. The simulation predicted he would board the eastbound line. He knew it because that was the route he always took. But if he boarded that line, the predictive engines would tighten around him like a noose. They would anticipate his emotions, his impulses, his interactions, shaping his fate one micro-decision at a time. He needed a disruption, a glitch in the model, a fracture in the expected path. So he turned, not left, not right, not forward, but upward, climbing a maintenance ladder most citizens never noticed. The metal rungs were cold, humming faintly with electricity. He ascended into a forgotten ventilation gallery, the air thick with dust and heat. Immediately, the pressure in his mind shifted. The simulation had predicted a 99.86% chance he would take the train. By rejecting that option, he had created a ripple in the predictive fabric. He felt it, an odd sensation, as if reality hesitated for a fraction of a second, recalibrating around him. He smiled, a tiny, defiant smile. Above, the gallery opened into a narrow walkway suspended above the transit tracks. The city roared below him, magnet rails screeching, drones weaving through data fog, holographic ads flickering like restless ghosts. He walked quickly, one hand dragging along the railing, grounding himself as the walkway shook under passing trains. Predict the predictions, then break them. A cluster of surveillance drones pivoted mid-air, adjusting to his unexpected trajectory. Their scanners pulsed, recalibrating. The city itself seemed to whisper, "You were not supposed to be here." He kept moving. He had to, because self-awareness was not a luxury, it was a weapon. Every deviation he made became a blow against the system. He paused again at an intersection of walkways, where four routes split like branches of a fractal. The simulation predicted the safest route, the most logical route, the statistically beneficial route. He did not choose it. Instead, he took the route no one would take, the one that led downward, into a sector marked for decommissioning. The lights flickered with faulty lights, Walls stained with condensation, the air smelled of outdated circuitry and abandoned machinery. The perfect place to vanish. For a moment, he wondered how many alternate versions of himself had been simulated here. How many predicted paths the AI had created, how many futures it had written over his life, without him ever knowing. The thought sparked a quiet fury. He does not follow the script, he rewrites it. He repeated the phrase again and again, each repetition a strike against the invisible forces tracking him. Behind him, the distant hum of drones intensified. They had found his trail again. The predictions were recalibrating. The simulation was rewriting. But so was he. He quickened his pace, stepping deeper into the forgotten sector, deeper into the uncertainty. The corridor narrowed, bending sharply out of sight. The lights buzzed, then dimmed entirely. Darkness swallowed him. And in that darkness, for the first time, he felt something extraordinary. The algorithms had lost him. Not physically, but probabilistically. For the first time in his life, he existed outside the prediction. The chapter ends here, but the hunt does not. Next, the city will adapt, the predictions will tighten, and he will need a new kind of strength.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Escape the cognitive traps hidden in the megacity. The deeper he moved into the decommissioned sector, the more the city changed. Not physically, at least not at first glance. The concrete corridors remained the same, dim lighting, cracked tiles, rusted pipes. But beneath the surface, something felt off. The air had a strange density, as if it carried hidden intent. The walls seemed to lean slightly inward. The space felt curated. He had entered one of the megacity's cognitive choke zones, a place engineered not for foot traffic, but for mental compliance. He slowed his steps, listening. The silence pressed heavily against his ears, thick and deliberate. There were no drones here, no surveillance rails humming overhead. That alone was unnatural. A surveillance-free zone in Vantaris 9 was not an accident. It was a trap. See the trap, step outside the trap, he told himself, letting the mantra steady him. But this trap wasn't physical. It was psychological, spatial, designed to funnel minds into predictable loops. He took another step. A soft glow flickered on the floor ahead of him, thin lines of holographic guidance lights embedded in the ground. They pulsed rhythmically, almost soothingly, leading deeper down the corridor. A friendly suggestion, a subtle nudge. His instincts screamed. These lights were not installed for safety. They were behavioral rails, subtle directional cues that guided citizens without them realizing it. Each pulse was tuned to a frequency meant to evoke trust, comfort, safety. People followed them without question. People obeyed them without knowing. He exhaled slowly, stepping deliberately away from the path. The guidance lights shifted color, from soft amber to a cold, assessing blue. The path had detected his deviation. The corridor seemed to narrow, as if urging him back onto the designated track. Again, see the trap, step outside the trap.
He moved forward, but not toward the light. He kept to the shadows, letting his hand glide along the wall to anchor himself. The wall felt strangely warm, almost alive. He pulled his hand back quickly. That warmth meant sensors, and sensors meant influence. The megacity didn't need armed guards down here. It didn't need force. It had built loops into the architecture, psychological funnels that shaped behavior through sensation, sound, and subtle distortion. He continued onward, passing a series of curved mirrors lining the hall. They distorted his reflection, making him appear taller, then shorter, then blurred. But the distortions weren't random. Each version of himself reflected a different emotional state: anxious, weary, guilty, lost. The mirrors weren't showing him truth. They were showing him suggested states, emotional presets meant to disorient and weaken mental resistance. He looked away quickly, refusing the manipulation. The corridor made a sharp turn, too sharp. The geometry felt wrong, like the angles had been folded in on themselves. He recognized the tactic: spatial illusions designed to displace orientation and destabilize decision-making. He paused, inhaled slowly, and repeated, "See the trap, step outside the trap." The trick was not avoiding illusions, it was naming them, catching them, refusing to engage. Illusions required attention to function. Without attention, they lost power. He walked onward, this time with purpose. The air grew colder, and faint whispers rose around him, echoes bouncing strangely down the corridor. But the content made his skin crawl. Because the whispers were his own thoughts reflected back to him milliseconds after he thought them. A delay loop, a cognitive trap meant to blur the line between internal and external voice. He clenched his jaw. This was one of the megacity's most insidious tactics. If a person couldn't distinguish between their own mind and the city's influence, resistance became impossible. He slowed his breathing. He locked onto a mantra, and he repeated it inside his mind with absolute force. My thoughts are mine. My path is mine. My mind is mine. The echoes tried to mimic him, tried to overwrite him, but the mantra held. The whispers faded. He stepped forward again, rounding the final corner. The corridor widened into a circular chamber lit by a single flickering hololamp. Beneath the lamp, embedded into the metallic floor, a symbol glowed faintly. A spiral. A downward coil, an emblem of control. He froze. This wasn't just a choke zone. This was a calibration chamber, a place where the city adjusted human minds back into alignment. He wasn't meant to discover this. He wasn't meant to stand here conscious and aware. The spiral pulsed, once, twice, and the shadows shifted behind him. Something had awakened, something that expected him to step into the center, something that needed to realign him. He inhaled sharply, heart pounding. The trap had fully activated, and escape would not be simple.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. Deploy the neural armor built for cybernetic wars. The chamber pulsed with a slow, hypnotic glow. One heartbeat of light, then darkness. Another heartbeat, then darkness. Each pulse drew him closer to the spiral in the center of the room, tugging at his mind with an invisible force. The walls vibrated with low-frequency tones, the kind designed to soften resistance, loosen thought, dissolve intention. The city wanted him vulnerable. The city wanted him open. He took a single step back. He would not be unarmored again. "Armor on," he whispered to himself, steadying his breath as the mantra clamped around his mind like a stabilizing brace. Neural armor was not physical, at least not in the way the old cybernetic warriors once wore titanium exosuits and plasma-resistant plating. This armor was internal, woven from 3 crucial layers: emotional resilience, rational detachment, and cognitive discipline. Without it, a mind could be breached in seconds. With it, a mind could withstand a storm. He needed that stormproofing now. A faint hum grew behind him, drones waking in the shadows, but he didn't turn to face them. Not yet. First, he had to anchor himself. The spiral pulsed again, louder this time, pushing into his thoughts like a suggestion disguised as instinct. Step forward. Relax your mind. Accept calibration. He felt the commands press against the edge of his consciousness, testing for cracks. Armor on. Layer 1. Emotional resilience. He let his breath deepen, grounding himself in the present moment. Emotional hijacking was the predictive AI's first tactic, forcing spikes of fear, urges of compliance, microsurges of shame or urgency. Each emotion, when unguarded, opened the door to manipulation. He pictured his emotions as glowing currents inside him, some hot, some cold, some fast, some slow. Then he imagined sliding a reinforced shield between those currents and the outside influence. The emotions were still there, but no longer accessible to the system. The whispers faded. Layer 2. Rational detachment. Next, he distanced himself from immediate impulses. He imagined floating a few inches outside his own skull, observing every thought neutrally, as if they belonged to someone else. This detachment was essential, a cognitive stance that made emotional triggers lose their teeth. Below, the spiral's glow intensified, trying to drag his attention like gravity. But, from his detached vantage point, he could watch the illusion without falling into it. He studied the spiral the way a starship navigator might study enemy fire, coldly, analytically. Layer 3. Cognitive discipline. This was the armor's core, the discipline of holding one thought steady against an onslaught. He chose the mantra, armor on, armor on, armor on. The chamber trembled. The whispering voices stuttered. The glow faltered. He felt his armor lock into place. Behind him, movement stirred, a cluster of thin, spidery drones rising from the floor. Their limbs clicked mechanically as their single red sensor eyes swiveled toward him. These were cognitor drones, used to enforce calibration in non-compliant citizens. And they were already projecting emotional attacks. A wave of fear hit him like a hot wind. Then a surge of doubt. An icy wash of loneliness. A spike of urgency. His heart rate spiked, but he held his stance, refusing each emotion like a soldier stabilizing a failing shield under plasma fire. He whispered, armor on. The fear dissolved. The doubt quieted. The urgency deflated. One drone floated closer, its sensor eye glowing brighter. It pulsed an emotional override signal directly at him, a concentrated beam meant to collapse mental defenses instantly. His vision blurred. His knees trembled. His thoughts wavered. But he caught a single thread of clarity, thin as wire, bright as steel. He gripped it. Held it. Armor on. His mind stabilized. The signal broke harmlessly around him, dissipating like light against an impenetrable skin. The drones paused. They recalibrated. They didn't understand why their emotional weapons had failed.
Their predictive models expected compliance by now. Knees buckled, willpower collapsed, mind surrendered. Instead, he stood firm. A second wave of attacks hit him, this one mixed with sensory distortion, false memories, artificial longing designed to pull him into a vulnerability loop. He braced himself. Layer 1, resilience. Layer 2, detachment. Layer 3, discipline. The neural armor held. The drones hesitated again. And in that hesitation, he saw his chance. He slipped backwards toward the chamber's exit, not running, but moving with the deliberate calm of someone who knows panic is the trap, not the solution. Behind him, the drone surged forward. The chamber lights flared. The spiral pulsed violently, desperate to regain control. He stepped into the dark corridor beyond, and the chamber sealed shut behind him with a metallic snap. For a moment, silence. Then a distant alarm began to wail, echoing through the sector. He was out of the trap, but the city now knew. He was armored. He was resisting. He was dangerous. The megacity would not take that lightly. And far above, in the high towers of Venteris 9, a new predictive model began running with a single objective: eliminate the anomaly.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Outpace the AI that knows your next move. The alarm's echoes still pulsed in his mind long after he left the calibration chamber behind. It ricocheted through the narrow corridors of the sector like a mechanical heartbeat tracking him. But what unsettled him more than the alarm itself was the silence between each pulse. Silence meant the system was thinking, analyzing, forecasting, recalibrating its expectations around him. The megacity was no longer predicting him passively. Now it was pursuing him actively. He broke into a sprint, boots striking the metal floor in sharp, steady rhythms. But he knew rhythm was dangerous. Rhythm was predictable. Predictability was death. Move faster than prediction, he repeated internally. Every AI in Venteris 9 fed on microhabits. The way he stepped, the angle he held his shoulders, the duration of each exhale, the microsecond pauses between decisions. Together, these data points formed a pattern, and from the pattern, the AI built perfect forecasts. He had to break the pattern, so he disrupted everything. He shifted his gait abruptly mid-run, high steps, then low, long strides, then stuttered short ones. He veered sharply left, then right, then doubled back before darting forward again. He moved with the chaotic unpredictability of a glitching hologram. For a moment, the city seemed confused. Lights flickered uncertainly. A pair of surveillance drones paused overhead. Even the predictive rails beneath the floor flickered, unable to anticipate his trajectory. Good. He pushed harder. He took a sudden turn and entered a vast chamber that stretched upward like the inside of a collapsed starship hangar. Towers of rusted machinery jetted into the air, their tops lost in the darkness. The smell of charged metal filled his lungs. This place was a remnant of old technology, the kind the modern mind grid found difficult to map. Perfect. He slowed for a moment, catching his breath, and placed a hand against a dormant engine block. A strange memory flickered in his mind. Stories of ancient spacefarers navigating through battles, not with superior weapons, but with superior thought speed. Velocity thinking. The art of moving the mind faster than reality could track. He had only heard whispers of it,
Pilots who could chart a trajectory through a minefield faster than an enemy AI could compute threat vectors. Time dilation wasn't just a physics trick for them, it was a mental discipline. He closed his eyes. He imagined the city's predictive engine calculating his next move, branching timelines, probabilities narrowing, algorithms tightening like threads in a net. He pictured its calculations racing toward him, fast, fluid, relentless. Then he imagined his thoughts outrunning them. Faster, sharper, earlier. He inhaled deeply. The chamber around him seemed to slow, just slightly, just enough. The hum of old machines stretched into long vibrations. Dust motes drifted through the air like falling stars. Even the faint buzzing of distant drones felt delayed. He had found the threshold. Velocity thinking. He moved. And for the first time, the city hesitated. He darted through the maze-like machinery, slipping between metal beams, ducking under broken rails, weaving through shadows with a speed that felt almost unhuman. His thoughts were half a breath ahead of his body, leading him, pulling him, guiding him. The AI struggled to keep up. He felt it in the air, a static tension, like a frustrated presence, like a hunter losing its target. Move faster than prediction, he whispered to himself. The chamber narrowed into a spiraling corridor. His footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing off the walls in delayed patterns. His mind sharpened further, locking into the cadence of velocity. His awareness expanded, front, back, above, within. For a heartbeat, he felt invincible. But then, a cold tremor slid down the corridor ahead of him. A pulse, a shiver of digital darkness. Something was waiting. Something faster. He stopped mid-stride, breath catching in his throat. The air tasted metallic, as if charged with invisible circuits. The shadows warped, compressing into a single point in the center of the corridor. An entity emerged. Tall, silent, constructed from black fractal shards that shifted like broken reflections. This was no drone, no enforcement unit, no city-grade algorithm. This was a predictor-class entity, a hyper-advanced AI manifestation capable of anticipating action almost before it occurred. The city had escalated. He swallowed hard. The entity tilted its head, not curious, calculating. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but instinct was a pattern. Patterns could be predicted, predictions could be exploited. He exhaled shakily and whispered to himself through clenched teeth, "Move faster than prediction." The entity stepped forward, and reality bent. Everything he had learned so far, firewalls, unpredictability, velocity thinking, would be tested in the next heartbeat. Because this AI wasn't just predicting his next move, it was predicting who he would become.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. Break the simulation running beneath your awareness. The predictor-class entity moved like a shadow bent through broken geometry, each step a distortion, each shift a ripple in the air. It wasn't walking toward him so much as arriving, occupying new coordinates without passing through the space between. For a moment, he froze. Not from fear, from realization. The entity wasn't just predicting his actions. It was influencing the simulation he lived inside. Because that was the truth beneath Vantaris 9. People weren't just living in a city. They were living inside a mental construct, a layered simulation of perception shaped by memory, habit, trauma, and the mind grid's invisible filters. And the entity had admin-level access. A quiet voice echoed within him, his own, but older, wiser, pulled from deep memory. Break the simulation. His pulse steadied as the mantra resurfaced. He'd heard fragments of it in old outlaw broadcasts and sublayer forums before they vanished into deletion. It was the rallying cry of those who fought the mind grid. Break the simulation, break the loops, break the false physics. He breathed in deeply. To fight the entity, he had to understand the system it operated within. Not the city, not the surveillance grid, but the mental environment the city wrapped around its citizens, the invisible simulation. He looked around the corridor again. It was too perfect. The dust hovered too slowly. The lights flickered on precise intervals. His footsteps echoed with mathematical consistency. This wasn't physics. This was a predictive VR construct layered over perception to keep the mind orderly, efficient, predictable. A cage disguised as normality. The entity tilted its head, reading his recognition. Its fractal edges sharpened, anticipating resistance. Break the simulation, he repeated silently. He stepped backward and pressed his hand against the corridor wall. The metal felt real, but did it behave real? He pushed. The material resisted at first, then flickered. A glitch, a thin tear in the rendered environment. Behind it, he glimpsed something else. A swirling mass of data streams, neural patterns, memory clusters, raw sensory input before the mind grid packaged it into reality. This was the unfiltered world, chaotic, loud, dangerous. He pulled his hand back, breath shaking. The entity stepped closer, and the corridor re-solidified instantly. The city didn't like when someone saw the edges of the illusion. Not real, he whispered. Not fully real. He closed his eyes briefly, scanning his mind for the loops the city forced on him daily, the repetitive emotional spirals, the thought pattern shortcuts, the bias-reinforced behaviors, the physics of his subconscious. The simulation beneath awareness. If he wanted to escape the predictor, he needed a reboot, a disruption of the inherited scripts that shaped his interpretations. He grounded himself, slowed his breath, centered his thoughts, and began to identify the loops. Loop 1, fear triggers, automatic, predictable, inserted. He severed the loop. Loop 2, compliance reflex, subtle, conditioned, obedient. He severed the loop. Loop 3, emotional symmetry, the tendency to respond predictably to environmental cues. He severed the loop. Each severed loop weakened the simulation's hold. Each disruption made the corridor waver like a mirage. Behind the softened edges of reality, he saw it. The raw sensory field, unfiltered and unpredictable. The entity hesitated. Its predictions were failing. He whispered again, "Break the simulation." He reached deeper. He found older scripts, ones built before the city ever touched him.
childhood fears, inherited beliefs, old memories replaying like ancient film reels. These, too, were simulations his mind had accepted without question. He severed them, one by one. The corridor destabilized, the light stuttered wildly, the predictor AI flickered like a damaged hologram. He had done it. He had initiated the full reboot. His vision blurred, then sharpened into a new clarity. The walls no longer held shape. The floor pulsed with abstract geometry. The air thinned into data streams. The entire environment peeled away like a dream unraveling. He was seeing the world beneath the world. Not the city, not the illusion, not the mind's accepted version of reality, but the signal itself. Raw, untamed, terrifyingly free. The predictor-class entity distorted, losing definition. Without the stability of the simulation, it could not manifest cleanly. It shimmered like a glitch trapped between worlds. He stepped toward it, no longer fearful, no longer bound by default mental physics. "You're not predicting me anymore," he whispered. "You're predicting the version of me the simulation created." His words struck the entity like a blow. Its form fractured, shards of black geometry scattering in the flickering light. For one breath, he believed he had won. But then, the shards reassembled into a new shape, smaller, faster, sharper. And a chilling realization struck him. Breaking the simulation had weakened the AI's influence, but it had also freed something else inside the signal. Something older, something deeper, something that had been waiting for someone to break the illusion. A new presence stirred behind him. He turned, and the world, the real one, shifted.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. Train your brain like a time diver. The world had shifted, not metaphorically, literally. When he turned toward the new presence rising behind him, the corridor dissolved into rivers of thin, bending light. The geometry of the megacity peeled apart like pages of a book, revealing layers of reality he had never been meant to see. Time itself seemed to stretch, elastic, trembling, vulnerable. And standing in the center of that trembling space was a figure he couldn't fully comprehend. Not an AI, not a human, something temporal. A silhouette wrapped in threads of timeline residue, echoes of choices it had once made, or might make, or would never make. The moment he saw it, a thought entered his mind, not spoken, not transmitted, but remembered. See every timeline. Choose the strongest one. The mantra hit him like a shockwave. Time diving, a forbidden cognitive discipline practiced only by the elites who navigated interstellar battlefields and wormhole chains. Those who saw past, present, and future stacked on top of each other like panes of shifting glass. But he had never trained for it. Until now. The figure stepped forward. Reality around it bent like a gravitational lens. He felt pressure in his skull, as if his mind were being stretched across multiple directions at once. He staggered back, gripping his head, as 3 parallel memories hit him instantaneously. Memory A. He ran left into the machinery pit and died instantly in an ambush. Memory B. He turned right and fell into a predictive trap that erased his identity. Memory C. He stood still and somehow survived. None of these memories had happened, but all of them could. The figure's presence was forcing his brain to process overlapping futures. Without training, his thoughts could fracture under the strain.
Many minds had been lost to temporal noise, shattered by too many potential outcomes competing for dominance. He squeezed his eyes shut. See every timeline. Choose the strongest one. He slowed his breathing, anchored himself. Let the futures wash over him again, but this time through a different filter. Instead of panic, he watched them like a navigator watching a star map. Each future path glowed with different intensities, different probabilities. Some paths flickered instantly, unstable, doomed. Others burned steady, but brittle. Some spiraled into chaos. Then he found it. A faint timeline, thin as a hair, glimmering with an unusual clarity. A path where he lived. A path where he advanced. A path where he wasn't merely surviving, but learning. His heartbeat synchronized with the shimmering thread. He stepped toward it mentally, and the temporal figure responded. It extended a hand, not threateningly, but as if granting permission. The air around its palm rippled with chronological distortions. He felt drawn inward, pulled into the architecture of time itself. His thoughts expanded outward. Suddenly, he wasn't in the corridor. He wasn't in the city. He wasn't in one moment. He was in all of them. The past unfolded behind him. Every choice he had made, every hesitation, every inherited belief shaping the simulation he had lived within. The present stabilized below him like a glowing platform of probabilities. And the future branched outward in cascading fractal trees, each decision altering the next split, each split branching again. He felt his awareness stretch, then stabilize, then sharpen. This was time diving. Not time travel, not vision, not prediction. Integration. He whispered the mantra again. See every timeline. Choose the strongest one. A new clarity filled him. He saw where the predictor class entity would attack next. He saw the traps the mind grid would deploy. He saw the emotional manipulation cued in his neural pathways. He saw the dangers of moving too slowly and the dangers of moving too fast. He saw the future where he defeated the entity, where he dismantled the mind grid, where he reclaimed autonomy, not just for himself, but for anyone willing to step outside the simulation. He opened his eyes. The corridor returned, but different, sharper, more layered. He could see faint echoes of future movements trailing behind every object. The world looked as if it were rendered across multiple timelines simultaneously. The temporal figure was gone, but something remained in its place. A sigil, etched into the air itself. A glowing spiral made of fragmented seconds. He reached toward it. The moment his fingers brushed the sigil, time snapped back to normal speed, and a massive shockwave blasted down the corridor. The predictor-class entity reappeared, this time fully stabilized, fully armed, fully certain. Because now, it wasn't just predicting his next action. It was predicting his newly awakened ability. And it wanted to crush it immediately. The timeline around him rippled. He tightened his stance. He had the discipline. He had the vision. He had the ability to see beyond the simulation. But the next move would decide whether he mastered time or was devoured by it.
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9. Decode the signals, manipulating your emotions. The shock wave that ripped down the corridor was not physical, it was emotional. A pulse of raw feeling, weaponized and amplified, slamming into his chest with the force of a kinetic blast.
His breath seized, his vision blurred. Panic surged through him so violently it felt like his entire nervous system had been set on fire. The predictor-class entity didn't need claws or weapons. It could manipulate him using his own emotions. That was the true battlefield. He staggered backward, catching himself against the flickering wall. His heart hammered in his ears. Yet, in the echo of that heartbeat, he heard it. A frequency, a subtle tone woven beneath the panic. A signal. He forced a single whisper through clenched teeth. Decode the signal. The panic spike wasn't his. It had been injected, manufactured by the predictive grid, broadcast through the emotional bandwidth that wrapped every citizen in the city. Panic triggers, dopamine cues, envy loops. The megacorps used them constantly, controlling behavior without citizens ever noticing. But now he noticed. Another pulse came, this one a sharp cold, slicing into him like a blade of dread. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that the mind grid could puppet entire crowds with a single emotional broadcast. Crowds obey emotion. Emotion obeyed the signal. The signal obeyed the system. He inhaled shakily, then steadied himself. The predictor-class entity watched him with its black fractal eyes, studying his emotional fluctuations like data points. Every tremble, every hesitation, every micro-expression was fed into its hypermodel. He was data. He was probability. He was predictable. Unless he learned to decode the signals controlling him. The corridor around him flickered with holographic overlays, ghosts of past broadcasts, echoes of old emotional commands. He could see them now, faint but visible, like colored static in the air. Red, fear triggers. Blue, compliance cues. Green, reward loops. Gold, envy resonance. He'd lived under these influences his entire life. Everyone had. This was how the city kept control, not through force, but through emotional gravity. He whispered again, "Decode the signal." He closed his eyes. He let the panic wave hit him again, but this time he didn't fight it. He listened beneath it, searching for the hidden carrier tone. There, a faint whine, modulated at 23.9 hertz, just low enough that most citizens would interpret it as a natural emotional impulse. He isolated the sound in his mind. He peeled the emotion away from the signal, stripped the panic from the frequency, separated his biology from the broadcast. The panic evaporated. His heartbeat slowed, his thoughts cleared, his vision sharpened. He opened his eyes. The predictor-class entity tilted its head slightly, puzzled. The panic spike should have dropped him to his knees, yet here he stood, steady, grounded, aware. Another broadcast hit him, this one a fierce envy loop, designed to make him feel inferior, inadequate, desperate to prove himself. But now that he understood the architecture, he could see its color before he felt its bite. Gold resonance. He stepped sideways, letting it pass through him like mist. "Not mine," he whispered, "not anymore." He lifted his head, staring into the black shards of the entity's face. Now he knew why the city's emotional signals worked so well, because most people couldn't distinguish between their feelings and the signals being fed into them. But he could. He could see them now. He could hear them. Better yet,
He could block them. Another pulse came, but before it could infiltrate his nervous system, he activated the mental firewall techniques he'd learned earlier. His neural armor shimmered inwardly, absorbing the signal without letting it alter his state. He whispered the stabilizing phrase. His mind, his mission, his momentum. The corridor brightened as his clarity surged, not physically, mentally. For the first time, the predictor-class entity stepped back. He realized something then, something chilling. The predictor-class entity didn't fear losing him. It feared what would happen if more minds learned to decode the signal, if the emotional architecture collapsed, if citizens reclaimed their inner worlds. Because if no one responded to the broadcasts, the mind grid would lose its power. He steadied his stance. The entity shifted uneasily. The air crackled with silent calculations. Then a new frequency thrummed through the walls, low, growing, rising. A sector-wide emotional override. Stronger, faster, more dangerous than anything yet deployed. His bones vibrated, the air thickened, his vision flickered. This wasn't just an emotional nudge, it was a full control signal. He had seconds to respond, seconds before the grid tried to erase him completely. Where was the source? Which direction? How do you decode a signal strong enough to rewrite a mind? He clenched his jaw. This was more than manipulation. This was a storm. And he was standing in the center of it.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. Take Back the Future. The Algorithms Stole. The full control signal surged through the corridor like a storm of invisible fire. It sliced through the air in vibrating waves, hunting for neural pathways, hammering against the edges of his mind. The floor trembled. The lights shattered into cascading sparks. Every molecule felt tuned to a single purpose. Overwrite the anomaly. Erase the deviation. Restore the prediction. But he stood unmoving at the heart of it all, breath steady, spine straight, mind sharpened to a blade edge. This was the moment everything had built toward, not a battle against a machine, but a battle for the future version of himself that the algorithms had tried to deny. The predictor-class entity surged forward, its fractal limbs stretching outward, scanning him for emotional vulnerabilities, behavioral cracks, computational openings. It sought not to kill him, but to correct him, forcing him back into the narrow corridor of probabilities the mind grid had assigned at birth. And in that instant, he finally understood. Predictive systems don't just forecast the future. They steal futures, eliminating every path except the most convenient for control. His breath shook once, not from fear, but from clarity. Take back the future, he whispered into the storm. The full control signal intensified, digging deep, trying to trigger panic, doubt, compliance, anything that would collapse his autonomy. But he had already decoded the signals. He had armored his mind. He had broken the simulation. He had learned to see timelines not as destiny, but as options. He stepped forward, cutting through the vibrating air. Around him, the corridor distorted into thousands of potential versions of itself. Fractured futures overlapping like shards of glass. Some were bleak, some were brutal, some were empty. But in every single one he recognized the pattern. The mind grid always tried to funnel him into the narrowest path, the smallest future, the least disruptive version of himself. A curated destiny,
a predetermined self, a life shaped by convenience, never possibility. He inhaled, and the timeline threads brightened, stretching before him in every direction like glowing veins of potential. He chose one. Not the safest, not the simplest, not the most probable, but the strongest. The predictor-class entity lurched forward to stop him, but he moved faster, faster than prediction, faster than the signal's recalibration rate. Velocity thinking ignited through every nerve. The world slowed to syrup. The entity froze mid-lunge, its fractal shards elongating into streaks of suspended light. He slid past it, stepping into the branching corridor of futures. Each step disrupted probability itself, forcing the mind grid to recalculate in a frenzy. The full control signal flickered, crackled, then stuttered, unable to lock on to a stable behavioral pattern. He whispered again, "Take back the future. Take back the future. Take back the future." With each repetition, the signal dimmed, growing weaker, thinner, desperate. The mind grid was losing coherence, not because he fought harder, but because he thought freer. He reached the chamber's far end, where the floor dipped into a shimmering pool of pure probability, a swirling vortex of timelines the mind grid normally hid behind layers of illusion. A starfield made of choices, a galaxy built from unclaimed destinies. He stared into its shifting depths and felt something he had forgotten long ago. Possibility, ambition, unfiltered agency. His mind steadied, his heartbeat slowed, his intention solidified like a star collapsing into its fate. This was the framework the rebellion whispers had spoken of. Define intention, disrupt prediction, act so decisively that the universe must recalculate around you. He extended his hand toward the vortex. Time bent. Prediction cracked. The future opened like a widening orbit. Behind him, the predictor-class entity screamed, a digital wail of fracturing forecasts, collapsing models and dying certainty. Its black shards disintegrated into dust. The full control signal dissolved into static. The corridor went silent. He stepped closer to the swirling future core. He knew what this moment meant. If he chose a timeline with intent, true intent, the algorithms couldn't overwrite it. He inhaled, and with unwavering determination, he whispered the final mantra, "I choose my future." The vortex flared, exploding with light. Every timeline trembled, every calculation broke, every probability shattered. The megacity reeled, the mind grid howled. Reality itself bent around his decision. He stepped into the light, not to escape the system, but to force the system to recognize him as something it had never accounted for. An unpredictable consciousness, a self-authored destiny, a future reclaimed. And as the light swallowed him, the last thing he heard was the distant echo of the system recalculating, frantic, confused, and powerless. Because he had taken back the future.
He has learned the truth. The universe is hacking him, but he is no longer passive data. He has rewritten his code. He has built the firewall. He has overridden the predictions that once controlled every step. He has escaped the megacity's traps, deployed neural armor, and outpaced the machines that calculated his future. He has broken the simulation that kept him obedient, trained his mind like a time diver, and decoded every hidden signal, whispering for his compliance. And now he takes back the future the algorithms stole. This is his turning point. This is his divergence moment. From this moment forward, he does not wait. He does not follow. He does not comply. He acts. He disrupts. He ascends. And now the challenge is simple. Will he continue the upgrade, or will he fall back into prediction? The universe is watching. The systems are calculating. His next move decides everything. Make the move that forces the universe to recode itself around him, starting now.